This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
As I said last time, we didn't finish everything we did last time, so we were going to look at last time, so let's do that now. Talk about Fichte and talk about Schiller. I think it's missing now.
I think
Yeah.
it's just
Okay, we'll be back then. Talking about Fichte and talking about Schiller as a kind of further development and change of the kind of approach that we began to see with Leibniz. Really, matter became a very dynamic thing, and the relation between matter and spirit in the concept of the monad, something that we looked at. And then, remarkably, how in Kant we got this ontological analysis of the concept of matter as a way to provide foundations for philosophy of nature, but also as a part of the repudiation of the problem of the transcendental reduction of the categories. So the concept of matter became there a very specific, very important concept in the whole, the systematic nature of Kant's philosophical project. And in a way that kind of plays, which is something that I think is not that much talked about perhaps in scholarly literature. That sort of systematically important place of the concept of matter is something that we also see in Fichte. So I want to look a little bit at that, so the next step in the history of this idea. And then I want to look at Schiller, which is Schiller's letters on aesthetic education of mankind, in which the concept of matter also plays an important role in what is for Schiller ultimately a question of what is the function of culture in human life. And I think, I don't know if you agree, but I think Schiller's text is very beautiful. It's very beautifully written. It's not a philosopher who is speaking, a poet, you can tell that. But at the same time there are very many points where you can see his closeness to what Fichte is doing, and also his closeness to Kantian approaches. And so I think it would be useful for us to highlight those and to look at what he how he uses this opposition of form and matter, which we've talked about before. We see that distinction between form and matter also in Fichte's philosophy. And so what I did is send you a little bit, a short paragraph from Fichte's foundations of the entire theory of science, translated Grundlagen der gesamten Wissenschaftslehre, the 1794-95 edition. There have been several reworkings of this text by Fichte, sort of updating it and publishing new versions, which is a first statement of a kind of speculative idealism away from Kant, but at the same time, according to Fichte, it was very much a matter of drawing out things that were for him implicit in Kant, but in doing that he moves far beyond the Kantian philosophical scheme into a notion of a productive subjectivity that creates in the movement of positing itself over and against something that is not it, producing the forms and the dynamism of reality as we experience it. Okay. And in that, so very important concept there is Tätigkeit, activity or agency, the self-positing nature of the self, of the I, the Ich, and the fact that every positing of oneself, of an Ich, is a negation of something else. And that is the beginning of a dialectical notion, if you want to put it like that, that will later be taken up by Hegel, by Schelling, etc. From this basic scheme, we get a certain interpretation of the concept of matter and the concept of form, and it's all hones in on an analysis of the notion of substantiality, of what a substance is. So what substance is a classical term in philosophy, what the really existing thing, the nature of the entity of which we can say that it truly exists, what that is. And in this little text we see, I think, something very interesting happening. So I want to just go through it and also maybe draw a little bit there on the sheets to get the thought out. I don't have it in English. That's a real shame. Yeah. So, how do you do? I should have asked you for it.
Well, it's not just only available in kind of print.
Yeah, but maybe you could scan. Yeah. No, so sorry, I didn't have the text in English, so I have to make do with the German. But that's well, you know, if you wrote, if there are points where you don't understand, then you say so.
In physics vocabulary, it's about some 10 words, isn't it?
What?
It's about the same 10 words. Just
same 10 words.
These are different combinations. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. So, well, let's just go through what is going on here, and then we can discuss it. Yeah. So there is in this text, which has to do with the foundation of theoretical knowledge. There has been a discussion on the concept of effectiveness, of Wirksamkeit, and now there is going to be a discussion of substantiality, in which Fichte says the notion of agency of form and agency of matter, the act nature of form, the act nature of matter, is synthesized and unified, and then he sets out to discuss the agency of form and the agency of matter, and says that what this is about is that we have to understand that by doing this we can understand the nature of substantiality in a proper way. Now, then we get draw it out. Then we get the idea that that a concept, a form, is a determination, and this determination is a positing. And when something is posited or determined, then something else is excluded from it. And so when something is posited, something else is posited as not posited, in a way. Yeah? So there is a negation by affirmation. So what has not been posited, Fichte says, has been posited in a way, namely as not been posited. Yeah? Is that still clear? Es soll demnach nicht überhaupt vernichtet werden. So that which is not been posited is not simply negated, not completely negated, wie Wechsel der Wirksamkeit, as in effectiveness, when one thing takes the place of something else, sondern nur ausgeschlossen. It has been excluded from a certain sphere, aus einer bestimmten Sphäre. Es ist demnach nicht durch das Setzen überhaupt negiert, sondern nur durch ein bestimmtes Setzen. It is not the positing that negates that which is not being posited, but it is a specific positing that excludes it. Durch dieses Setzen, das in seiner Funktion bestimmt, das in dieser seiner Funktion bestimmt, in seiner objektive Tätigkeit auch bestimmt ist, muss das als Gesetzte gleichfalls bestimmt, das heißt, es muss in eine bestimmte Sphäre gesetzt werden, als dieselbe ausfüllt. So let me draw that. I'll take my version here. later on we get a discussion of a piece of iron, but we'll first do it another way. So he says, if we take something and we posit it, like the concept of like a human being or so, then there is a sphere of the human being which is completely determined by that, whatever that is. Yeah? And then everything else is not that. And that is, so this is what is posited. Everything else, I deliberately don't draw a circle around it, because it is unbestimmt, he says. There's no boundary there. As soon as if I would say, this is then everything else, then I've given another concept. Yeah? So whatever lies outside of this sphere is unbestimmt, but it has been posited as not being that. And that's what it calls nicht gesetzt. Not posited. Posited as not posited. It is excluded. So this is the sphere of what is excluded. Yeah? And so, he says, so lässt sich einsehen, wie durch ein solches Setzen ein anderes gesetzt werden könne als nicht gesetzt. Es wird nur in diese Sphäre nicht gesetzt. So now we can understand how it is possible that something can be posited as not posited, simply not having been posited in this particular sphere here. And therefore this is an other. So there is the human being, and then there's everything that is other. And that lies outside of it. Yeah? Now, the fact that this has been fully determined, he says ausgefüllt, so it's been completed, there are no gaps there, does not mean that this is bestimmt, that this is determined. It can be, we don't know where it ends. Yeah? So there's no determination added to the sphere of the other simply by talking about the posited form, the human being in this example, whatever it is. Ja. Durch diese Handlung wird das Ausgeschlossene noch gar nicht in eine bestimmte Sphäre gesetzt. Seine Sphäre bekommt dadurch schlechthin kein anderes Prädikat als ein negatives. Es ist nicht diese Sphäre. Everything that we can say here is that it is not the human being. That's the only thing we can say about it. So it is a pure, it is a negation. Yeah? What it is, what it might be, and if it is determined or bestimmt in any way, is entirely is open. Yeah? Also der bestimmte Charakter der formalen Tätigkeit bei der Wechselbestimmung durch Substantialität ist ein Ausschließen von einer bestimmten erfüllten und insofern Totalität des darin enthaltenen Sphäre. So we're excluding from a sphere that in itself is totality, because it has been completely determined. Yeah, but that totality only applies there. Now we get a dialectical idea. Yeah? And so we go towards the conception of matter. He says in the next paragraph, the difficulty here is that what has been excluded, we call it B, we call this A, yeah, has been posited only in the sphere of A, it is not posited. But the sphere of A counts as a totality, because it is a determined concept. Because it counts as a totality, it would follow that B could not at all have been that B could not at all have been posited. And so the sphere of A has to be posited as totality and non-totality at the same time. It is a totality insofar as it is itself a determined concept without any indeterminacy in it. It's ausgeführt. But it is a non-totality insofar as it is precisely the not positing of the other, the positing of the non-positiveness of the other. Yeah? And so it is totality and non-totality at the same time. Sie ist gesetzt als Totalität in Beziehung auf A. So insofar as we're talking about A, this sphere is a totality. Everything that falls under human being belongs in it. Yeah? But it is posited as non-totality in relation to this excluded other, B. But then, as I already said, and he says here now, nun aber ist die Sphäre von B selbst nicht bestimmt. This other, the sphere of what is not a human being, is in itself not determined. Yeah? It's only negatively determined as being not A. Okay? And so, what we get, if we look at the whole situation, is that the concept, the form A, the human being, is posited as a determined form, and in this sense a totality, or a complete part of what itself is an incomplete whole. This is an incomplete whole. And yet we can say that the form A, and now for example human being, is a part of that and is complete. So this is complete but incomplete whole, because we don't know where this non-A, what the limits of it are, is unbestimmt. And so, he says, das Setzen einer solchen höheren, beide, die bestimmte und unbestimmte, in sich fassende Sphäre, wäre diejenige Tätigkeit, die soeben aufgestellte formale Tätigkeit möglich würde, mithin die Tätigkeit der Materie, die wir suchen. So he says, this positing of the human being is possible because there is an incomplete whole of which what is excluded by the positing of the form of the human being and the form of the human being itself, so A and B, both part of it, and it's unbestimmt, it's undetermined, because that is there, this first determination is possible at all. We can only give bestimmte, determined, we can only create determined forms, posit determined forms, because there is an unbestimmte, undetermined totality, of which that what it excludes is part. And this sphere, which contains both what is determined and non-determined, and which is therefore the whole, is itself also, as everything, an agency, an act, is positive, yeah? And that is what Fichte calls matter. So matter is the name for this higher sphere which contains both the determined and the undetermined in itself. And it makes the positing, the formal positing of a form, of a determined form, possible in the first place. That's matter. So that's a very, let's say, at first sight, a very counterintuitive notion of matter, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, so I was going to say, translating materia as matter, but is it not the sense just of content as distinct from form? And then it would have a different meaning, wouldn't it? Quite a different meaning.
Namely?
That this activity, there's a formal activity that if there is an A, there is a not A, that's really formal.
Yeah.
And then there's some sort of activity which is to do with the content. If there is a a definite A, there is a definite not A, which is not A, and then there's the content of the not A is determined by the content of the A. So that is purely to do with content, to the extent that there is something in the form, there is something in the not A.
And do you think that's different from saying matter?
Do you think maybe the difference is matter as something which kind of adequates to form, and matter which, in what you just presented, and what you presented does actually reminds me a lot of Zizek and his kind of Lacanian, this notion of the truth, or call it what you will, being some kind of lack or failure, as opposed to something which neatly pours into the bottle of form.
Yeah.
How does that help? Probably not.
Can you? Because I think I don't disagree with what you say, but I think I don't see the real difference with.
Okay.
But maybe you can help.
Well, I'd say something different. Not necessarily. I wasn't sure about your identification of the higher sphere, which Victor refers to as this totality of activity, with the activity of matter, as if that's the name given to the higher sphere. I took it that the higher sphere was going to be engendered as a result of the interaction between form and matter. Form manifests most obviously in the determinate, matter in the indeterminate. So it's more of a synthesis of the two, rather than matter being a way of referring to the higher order sphere.
Yeah. So in what follows, we get a mutual dependency of both.
Yeah.
The agency of form, which determines matter, and the agency of matter, which determines form.
Yeah.
So we'll get there in a minute. But can I go back to this point about content? Can you say it again?
Well, maybe he talked, as perhaps it ought to be in this last sentence of the paragraph, at least at the top of the page that you sent. So that's the paragraph that begins, das Setzen eines solchen Hören.
Yeah.
But where it's emphasised, it's so that sentence there is talking about two activities, isn't it? And it's saying that the whatever this matter or content is, its activity posits the higher sphere, a single sphere which contains the determined and the undetermined.
Yeah.
And in positing those in that wider sphere, it makes possible the activity of form.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what is that activity of matter?
Yeah.
And I took it that activity was saying that if, to the extent that there actually is a determined A, then the not A is also determined at least to the extent that it is not A. There is some content.
Yeah.
There,
Okay.
as opposed to something purely formal. These are the distinctions of the. But for any whether or not it exists, there is a not A.
Yeah. Okay. No, let's maybe look at the example of the moving piece of iron to see if we can make sense of that. Yeah? So he says, I'll move this up a bit. So he says,
when he moves, then he talks about substance as well as materials, and they seem to be distinct.
Yeah.
Well, substance is more like form, and matter is more like accident.
Well, I think he will end by saying that that substance is das Allumfassende, is that which contains it all, the complexity. And so I had in my reading, I had sort of equated substance with matter as the inclusion of determinacy and determinateness and indeterminateness, plus both forms of activity, the activity of matter and the activity of form. And that together is substance, almost like a world soul or so, that generates specific forms that are posited as what they are in themselves, as formal activity, and by doing that, that's excluding what is not, what they are not. But I think we're going a bit too fast. Shall we look at this example, a piece of iron, see if it, then we see how this notion of content might play a role there as well. So he seems to be saying there is a moving piece of iron, C. There is a piece of iron which is C, and it moves. Yeah. And then so he says that it's first a concept which is posited, a mere concept, and that is the piece of iron simpliciter, so simply the piece of iron, which is A.
Yeah. Is it, or iron? Is it a piece or das Eisen schlecht?
Das bestimmte Stück Eisen, das bestimmte Stück Eisen ist C. So that thing is C. Ja? Das Eisen schlechthin, wie es durch einen bloßen Begriff gesetzt ist A. So that's the stuff it's made of, you might say. Yeah? As an absolute totality. So iron, that's the concept. Everything that's iron. It's an abstract concept in a way. And then there's the piece of iron C, and then there is the movement of it, and that's B, that he says, yeah? And then he says, so by positing A, you're excluding everything from it, that's not A, so also B, also is movement. That's not part of A, is it? Doch hebt ihr die Bewegung des Stücks Eisen gleich C nicht auf, ihr wollt ihre Möglichkeit gar nicht schlechthin leugnen, also ihr setzt sie außer der Sphäre von A in eine unbestimmte Sphäre, weil ihr gar nicht wisst, unter welcher Bedingung und aus welchem Grunde das Stück Eisen gleich C sich bewegen möge. Ja? So, the B is not part of A, but we do not want to exclude the possibility of a moving piece of iron, C, yeah, and so we put this C in an undetermined sphere outside of A. It is that moving piece of iron, because we don't know under which conditions the piece might be, the PC might be moving or might be made to move. The sphere A is the totality of iron, and it is not it at the same time, because the movement of C, namely B, is also iron, and it is not contained within the concept of iron. Does that still make sense?
So actually just concentrate on the movement and above.
Yeah.
So there's a piece of iron which is A.
Yeah.
And by positing the A you get the C,
Yeah.
which is non-determined.
Yeah.
And then did we equate the C with the B? Or they're still two separate things? What's the relationship between them?
Yeah. So I think we have A, which is iron,
Yeah.
and we have C, which is this particular piece of iron. And now C is also moving. Yeah. Now, B, which is the movement,
yeah.
is not part of A.
No.
But C is part of A. Or not, we don't know, because C is the moving piece of iron.
Yeah.
So where does the B belong? In other words, the sphere of A, the totality of iron, is both the totality of iron, because it is the abstract concept of everything that's iron, but it is also not it. It is also not it, because the movement of C, and then he says, which is itself also iron, is not part of it, because it is iron moving. Of course, you might say, I'm looking at iron insofar as it's iron, and not insofar as its movement. And that's precisely the point. That is abstraction. So I can create an abstract concept by excluding the totality, and then I have the totality of an abstract concept, but the totality to which that applies is a totality in which these forms are all part of each other, and in which there are just moving pieces of iron or whatever it is that we're talking about. Yeah? And that's why he then goes on to say, so you have to, je muss demnach beide Sphären eine höhere ziehen, die beides bewegtes und unbewegtes Eisen in sich fassen. So we have to draw a higher sphere around the other ones, which contains both moving and moved and unmoved iron.
Presumably the latter is now a fourth component, D, in fact, isn't like as such, because iron in motion and iron rest are the two possibilities of iron itself, distinct from A.
Yeah, so we have A, iron, we have B, movement, and these do not coincide, and then we have C, which is a moving piece of iron, so that's almost like this. It is part of both, but they are not part of each other. But there are also unmoving pieces of iron, so we have to draw a higher, you can't really represent it one-dimensionally, two-dimensionally. You have to draw a higher sphere in which both the moving and the unmoving is contained, and the iron. Yeah? That's how I read it. Die beide Bewegungseisen in sich fassen.
So this higher level is a level in which the movement or non-movement of the iron is actually essential to what iron is, rather than being something merely contingent. It's not something that, iron doesn't happen to move, it moves because of magnetism and, etc.
Maybe.
This is at the higher level anyway.
That's certainly the case at the higher level. We're talking about complete determination. So iron either moves or it doesn't move. And I don't know whether that has to do with the nature of iron or just with the logical. Maybe you could say in this case it's almost a logical thing whether something moves or not moves. But maybe it also has to do with the nature of iron. That could be. But I think but certainly it's the case it's either one or the other. And then he goes on, I think that's where it becomes a little bit clearer now, saying, insofar as iron, das Eisen, which I now take to be C, that piece of iron, insofar as it completes, erfüllt, this higher sphere, so far as we can say it is a moving piece of iron or it is a non-moving piece of iron, it is substance.
So you're claiming that's C?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking that. Insofar as Eisen.
I think it's a higher order conception of iron as a substance which can have movement or lack of movement as its accidents. So you've already gone beyond the simple concept of iron into a more rounded sense of what iron can be.
Yeah, okay, I think that's right. That's right. And I think that one step further is to say part of that is also that it is always this particular piece of iron or another one. In that sense, I refer to C, but it's not only this particular But that iron exists as particularized in a body of iron is maybe another determination that belongs to it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Insofern das Eisen diese höhere Sphäre erfüllt, ist das Substanz. And so it is substance insofar as it is this completeness. That's I think the main point, and not, as he says, nicht insofern as die Sphäre A als solche erfüllt, wie man gewöhnlich dafür hält. We tend to think that A is the substance, namely the iron as an element, the stuff. Yeah? But that's not the substance. The substance is the total determination of what it can be. And he says this is an abstraction, or he calls it here, and that's why you see it, he calls it Ding an sich, which Kant, of course, would roll over in his grave if you call that the Ding an sich. But he sees that as a kind of abstraction of in this case, iron.
It's also what iron, according to what we said, really is, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's also what iron really is. If you want to say what iron is, you give an account of what iron is in whatever fashion. You don't sort of start going to a long list of all the states iron can be, because that's just that's the move to a different logical level. So I don't think he's been quite as dismissive of the more restricted sense of what the thing is here as a.
Yeah, that's right. He's quite restrictive here, but he does that because he makes a distinction between essence or Wirklichkeit of something, the nature of something, and substance. We're talking about substantiality.
Yeah, substantiality is more determinate, more extensive way of construing things.
But you could say, okay, when substance is the question, what is it? And when we ask what is iron, we say this, we say A, and not all the rest of it. Yeah, so that's I agree with that. Yeah. It goes on to say, movement and not movement are its accidents. Da sind die Nichtbewegungen in einem anderen Sinne zukommen als die Bewegung, aber auch das ich finde, wenn wir zu seiner Zeit sehen.
So in a way, I think you were slightly anticipating when you were claiming that the whole sphere is substance. In a way, what substance is A in relation to the whole sphere, because the other aspects are now understood as its accidents. So there's a stronger sense of them being properties of A. So the whole sphere is substance and its accidents.
Yeah, that's how. Well, yeah, no, that seems to be an ambiguity, isn't it? Because it seems to be that when he says Bewegung nicht Bewegung sind seine Accidenten, that sein refers to this higher sphere.
Well, because you've got that big bit in brackets in that sentence. So if you skip that, just read the.
So if you just read that.
It's the higher sphere. Insofar as iron fills the higher sphere as a substance, movement and movement are its accidents. So.
Yeah. So but that's not the iron that is A. Or that's what I meant.
Yeah, but the substance is only insofar as it is with its accidents. If you were to extract from its accidents, it would be backed away again. Just the claim of beauty, the idea of substance is inherently relational. So it involves signification of what the accidents are. And that's why we need something like B and C and so forth to be in the picture to have a sense of what substance is in its more articulated fashion.
That's right. Whereas in a more Aristotelian perhaps way of looking at it, you would say there is a substance and then there are accidents. The substance is iron and the accidents are moving and not moving.
That's
what I'm saying.
He doesn't seem to be saying that. Presumably it's the contrast. Instead of saying that there's iron which stands beneath movement or not movement, hot or cold, or presumably, he's saying there's something which is the iron, the thing in itself, the thing that's presumably outside consciousness, and then there's this, but then there's within, presumably within the mind, there is iron in all its both predicates and the opposite, or the absence of those predicates. And he chooses to call that substance.
Exactly. It's almost the happening of iron. The total implication in its relations with everything else. that is substantiality.
And that's iron in the mind, or is it?
Yeah, you might say.
Brain.
Yeah, you could, but certainly that comes into it. And he goes on to say later that from all of this it follows that the ideaalgrond and the realgrond, so the order of, you might say the order of knowing and the order of being, are the same at the end of the text. And that of course has to do with this, that he wants to move away from the idea that substantiality or substance is something that is just there, and then subsequently we get to know it. This leads to the whole Kantian problem, of course. Well, how can you then know it? You can't know it. You only know how it appears to you. What he's trying to do already here is to have a dynamic notion of appearance that allows him to say, look, that idea of the iron as it just exists over there, that is itself an abstraction. That's A, that comes later, as it were. There is a totality of implication, which is substance and accident, and that's what he calls substantiality, which is a productive activity of matter as much as it is a productive activity of form. And it plays out in this whole, this totality, which is unbestimmt, which is undetermined, and has the determined within it. That's a very exciting idea in a way, because that's almost like saying reality, the world, being is undetermined. Its borders, you cannot identify it. What you can identify is something within it that is what it is because it excludes everything else, but you don't know what everything else is.
Exactly. Does this actually say that? I thought the heart said at the end of the previous paragraph, top of the page, the higher sphere incorporates both the determinate and the undeterminate. I don't think in the next paragraph about the iron it says that the higher sphere is indeterminate. Surely it's meant to be the interaction of both determinacy in the form of A and the various indeterminacies, the accidents which it enters into. So I thought it was trying to make it more balanced synthesis.
In other way, within the brackets, it seems as though this higher sphere is determined because it's both moving and not moving are both determinations.
Yeah, but
it seems a strange thing, doesn't it? Slightly.
Although it's indeterminate which happens to be, in respect of what iron in fact is.
And there are many other determinations as well.
So indeterminate is clearly there, but I think it's pitched more into the accidents.
I don't see why he says that this indeterminacy is anything but total. I mean, there's determinacy within it, but this higher sphere is, he says clearly, a total vollständiger Teil eines unbestimmten und insofern nicht vollständigen Ganzen. So this whole is not complete. The whole, and I can only read that as meaning the whole of reality is not complete and is indeterminate.
Again, which is the sentence in German you're reading here?
When he says, nun aber ist die Sphäre von B selbst nicht bestimmt, so everything that's not A, remember in the original story, sie ist bloß negativ bestimmt, it's determined merely negatively, als die Sphäre nicht A, as the sphere not A. A würde mithin, so A would, in other words, then auf alles Rücksicht genommen wird, when we look at everything, when we take everything into account, gesetzt als bestimmter, is posited as a determined und insofern totaler vollständiger Teil and insofern total complete part eines unbestimmten und insofern nicht vollständigen Ganzen of an undetermined and insofern not complete whole.
Is there an alternative to the words divide from stimmen when Germans seek to stress the notion of limitation? Yeah, because the kind of Latin translation you're using, determination.
Yeah.
Which suggests, ending, limit, boundary, drawing, isn't really in Stimmen, is there? So, I mean,
Yeah.
So what do Germans say when they want to stress this notion of limitation? You know, because really, I mean, an English translation might be some of unbestimmt, might be something like unvoiced or unuttered,
Yeah.
you know, something of that nature.
Yeah.
So,
Bestimmt, but that's right. I think it's always a problem to say things like determination. I don't think determination is a very good translation of bestimmt in that sense. Bestimmt, apart from the reference to Stimme, means it's this and not that. Ein bestimmtes,
yeah.
ein bestimmtes Fahrrad, right? It's this particular bike, this one and not that one. But it doesn't really, like determination, or have this reference of a narrowing down. Yeah?
So it's kind of an ostensive grunt, as it were, you know, in terms of its kind of primal etymology. It's like making a noise to say this rather than that.
A determination is
Yeah.
what you might, I don't know another word for it now, is where you say, this is my patch. You know,
Yeah.
you draw a line around it. Whereas
Well,
bestimmt
again,
is saying this.
Yeah.
It's different. Yeah. But I think I don't know how to link it to a notion of Stimme.
because Kant at various points does actually specifically talk about boundaries and limits, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what word he uses.
Yeah.
But,
That's right. And so the notion of boundary and limit is not present in the Stimme. It is.
So it's more like a kind of on-off thing. You know, something is either
Yeah.
this or that, or
Yeah, it's always very difficult for me. In Dutch, the word that you would use is bepaling, and that's also a word that's often used in the logical context, but it derives from the word pole. So it is, you stick a pole in it, which is different from drawing a fence around it.
yeah.
And that seems to me to be a slightly different mental operation. Yeah, that's right. But how does that relate to this question of whether he is talking, whether the whole for him is incomplete?
Well, I mean, you were drawing on the board, you know, circles. I mean, you were quite literally.
Yeah, I was making Venn diagrams. Yeah. I think that's also in there, isn't it? I mean, he's really literally talking about a sphere, so a sphere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sphere can be determined or undetermined. So maybe that's maybe a difference. So you can have an undetermined sphere, which means that the notion of the sphere is not coextensive with that of determination.
So what's a Grenze?
Hence its limit, a border, really.
So would that do for an undetermined sphere?
It certainly would not have bound. It would not have.
But still, I mean, by its very kind of geometrical nature,
Yeah.
is determined. I mean, it is literally. I mean, it is a limit. I mean, it's a shape. I mean, a very specific shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it can be maybe a bit like an atmosphere. It's sort of, you can't really tell where it stops and where it ends. But he seems to be, I think he has in mind something far more radical when he says an incomplete whole.
Can I push you on that again? The opening of that sentence implies that this is a additional frame. So if you point it out highly into German, can you say A would be? So saying that we would end up with an indeterminate incomplete whole if we simply have A and B just conjoin, one as determinacy, one as indeterminacy. And that's why then a more structured articulation of the relations is required, as in fact then is delivered with the example of the iron, which then introduces the concept substance and accident. So I think he's saying that in this file we just have A and B, we have what we precisely refer to he refers to as an indeterminate incomplete whole. That's
Yeah.
not where we can remain. We must go further to achieve some sense of determinacy in relation to A and B, which takes us into the
Absolutely.
domain of substance and accident. So the incomplete indeterminate whole is where we've got to so far, but we go further straight away.
Yeah, that's true. We go further straight away, and that going further is a way of explaining how this whole determines itself in a process, comes to determine itself. And that is this dual motion, I think, of the activity of form determining matter. That's precisely that, how it comes to determine the matter, and the other way around, in the paragraph following, the one that comes to the activity of matter determining and conditioning form. And then, so that's right, but that's the movement that now comes. And then when we go to the Schiller text, we see that he does precisely the same thing. He also has matter and form as both active principles that determine and limit each other.
It is quite unclear yet, really, how matter and form fit. I mean, form less so, because we can understand how form would be, we go with the idea of determinacy.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a very good question. What the hell is he talking about when he says matter?
Yeah, it is.
That's what Graham's question at the beginning was, you know. And the moment you start to talk about matter, this is a problem that we started with in the beginning of the series. The moment you start to talk about matter, you treat it as a form. Yeah? So our concept of matter, that is itself this oxymoronic combination of form and matter. That's the difficulty with it. And that's one reason for certain people to say this concept has no meaning. Whereas I think there's this strong tradition in undercurrent of thinking in this whole history journal, where ultimately people say, no, you have to talk about it, even if you can't talk about it. You have to see that it is the outside of form, the outside of language, but you have to give it a name, otherwise it's not there. That seems to be coming very close to what Fichte is beginning to do here, and certainly what comes out fully in Schiller, when he says, if you don't give matter a form, it's not nothing, and if you don't materialize the I, the person, as he calls it, then the person, the human being, is nothing. And so he sees this as a co-determination, and I think that becomes in the end simply the position Adorno has in the next dialectic, where he says the philosophy is the genre which expresses the inexpressible. You have to express it in order for the inexpressible to be there, otherwise it becomes silence. Silence is something else than the inexpressible. But so matter becomes that point.
And that sample, the A and B and C, they've already got a form. There's a piece of certain matter and having a movement.
Yeah.
It's not like something indeterminate.
No, that's right. So I just don't know enough about Fichte. It really would be useful to go deep into it. Whether or not that means that what we are seeing here, what we're running up against now, are simply that which we call idealism in the German idealist tradition. That there is this drive that they cannot resist to make it into a form, which I think would be almost the essential ideological operation, to make matter into a form.
Because in Schiller there was the opening to the world.
Yeah.
Through sensibility, everything comes to you, and then what you do with it, that's what you give it form.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
The movement.
That's right. Whereas here, despite the fact that he's saying, look, this matter is undetermined, it is the totality that is undetermined that makes determination possible. What he is doing is here is giving a determination of it. What is left out of this discourse? So if we say this is a form, what is its unbestimmt, what is its other? And then he wants to exclude that. So I think it's difficult to say this, but you have to, the text itself has got to be read as a determination of as a Tätigkeit der Form, which determines matter, and as an activity of matter determines form. The process must be in the text as well.
Well, that's totally an idea about matter shared potentiality. So
That's behind this in a way, yeah. But yeah, that's right. But that's a different point. But it's so. To what extent is the very attempt of what he tries to do here something that excludes that you get a right view on what this unbestimmte, this undeterminedness of matter is. Let's maybe look at what Tätigkeit der Form bestimmte Materie, what that means. The activity of form determines matter. Yeah. So he says, only insofar as something has been excluded of absolute totality and is posited as not contained within it, can a more comprehensive but undetermined sphere be posited. That is a recapitulation of this first positing of form, I think. Nur unter Bedingungen des wirklichen Ausschließens ist eine höhere Sphäre möglich. Only under the condition of a real exclusion is a higher sphere possible. If there's no exclusion, there is no umfassende Sphäre, there is no more comprehensive sphere. In other words, there is no accident in the eye, there is no not eye. So it is only when there is exclusion that this higher sphere, which is both A and what is excluded from A, and which is indeterminate, becomes, in a way, if I can put it like that, actual. It becomes something only when there is something that excludes everything else from it. So, only when I say, that's not me, is there the possibility of a higher sphere that encapsulates both I and not I, but that is undetermined. And so it is the activity of form, that's the positing of the not I, that determines matter. It's a very difficult and tricky point.
Yeah, determining matter, it's determining the activity of matter, isn't it? It's bestimmt die Materie.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So it's yeah.
Yeah, so the exactly, yeah, that's right. Yeah. That matter becomes, I forgot how to put it just now, but it's only in that activity of form that matter becomes something, acquires an effectiveness. Der Sinn dieses Satzes ist sogleich klar und wir setzen bloß einige Worte über seine Anwendungen zu. So he says this is completely clear in itself, and we are only adding some words as to its application. The I is originally posited as positing itself, and this positing itself completes the sphere of its absolute reality. It's nothing else than positing itself, the I. And that exhausts the sphere of its, what he calls here, absolute reality, and we can understand absolute here as literally as from absolve, as being detached from, yeah? Or as detached from everything else. If it posits an object, then this objective positing has to be excluded from its sphere. And has to be posited in the opposite sphere of not positing itself. That's clear. If the subject is positive, then if it posits an object, that object is pure not positing itself. That is its other, that is its sphere. In other words, you can see here, I is activity, object is pure passivity. It's nicht sich setzen. That's also what we get in Schiller, where activity, passivity is the way form and matter or person and Zustand, Person und Zustand are contrasted. Ein Objekt setzen und sich nicht setzen ist gleichbedeutend. Von dieser Handlung geht das gegenwärtige Raisonnement aus. So this is on which the current argument is based. It claims, das Ich setzt ein Objekt oder es schließt etwas von sich aus, the I opposes an object or excludes something from itself, simply because it excludes and for no higher reason. That is what it is. Durch dieses Ausschließen nun wird erst die höhere Sphäre des Setzens überhaupt, davon abstrahiert, ob das Ich oder ein Nicht-Ich gesetzt wäre, möglich. It's only on the basis of this that the higher sphere of positing as such, almost as a concept, abstracted from the question whether the I or a not I is being posited, becomes possible. And he says it is clear that diese Vorstellungen are idealistisch. It's clear that this way of arguing is idealist because it starts from the active positing of the subject. And that it coincides with the earlier formulated quantitative idealism, according to which the I posits something as not I simply because it posits it. In einem solchen System müsste demnach der Begriff der Substantialität gerade sortiert werden. In such a system, notion of substantiality would have to be clarified, elucidated the way it has just been done. And then he says, it also becomes clear dass das sich setzen in doppelter Beziehung der Quantität vorkomme. So this positing itself occurs in a double relation of quantity. First, as an absolute totality, namely, insofar as it's a positing of itself, it's filling out of this sphere of itself, and as einmal and the other one als bestimmter Teil einer unbestimmten Größe, as the determined part of an undetermined magnitude, the whole. It is totality, absolute totality, insofar as it posits itself, this is what it is. But in doing that, it posits also matter, I would say. It posits also that it is a determined part of an undetermined whole. And that becomes part of what it is. So it cannot abstract itself from its other. And its other is this undetermined whole, which the determined identity is a part, and in determining itself as an identity, it activates, as it were, it activates what he calls matter. It activates the whole precisely insofar as it says, I'm not that whole. And so the whole is only present as what the determination that posits itself is not. In other words, we have here the birth of, you referred to Zizek already, we have here the birth of the lack in identity, the lack in positing, the whole in the whole, as some people say. Yeah. And that is the activity of form, determining matter. And then he says, so now we also realize, now it's clear, that substance then does not mean that which is, which continues, but it means that that which includes the whole. That's allumfassend. How do you translate that into English?
Here it's given as all comprehending.
All comprehending.
Which is
literature. I think if you translate all the words to their Germanic roots, it would be, and then back into English, it would be all around fitting.
Embracing.
All embracing, yeah, but if you, that's right, all embrace is a Latin word. But all around fitting, allumfassend. But it's exactly that, all embracing. Okay, so then we go the other side. Tätigkeit der Materie bestimmt die Dinge, die erfahren. The activity of matter determines and conditions, he says here now, that of form. That would mean, würde heißen, die umfassende Sphäre, so the all-embracing sphere, as a more comprehensive one. So, with the subordinate spheres of I and not I within it, is simply posited. And only because of that, exclusion as the true act of the I, under some additional condition, which probably has to do with what it is that we are, that the I is excluding, becomes possible. So exclusion now the other way around is only possible because the higher sphere, the whole with the hole in it, has simply been put. And that's, if I understand the logic of the text, at this point in our reading, that's still a mystery, because we have to say, how could it be positioned? How could it simply be positioned? How could it simply be positioned? Who does that positing? It's not an Handlung des Ich. It's not an act of I, because I, not I, are the subordinate spheres of which this all-embracing, which are part of this all-embracing sphere. And then he says, so, if we say that, es ist klar, dass diese Folgerungsart auf einen Realismus führt. This way of arguing leads to realism. Yes, exactly. And to a qualitative realism at that. Ich und nicht ich sind, I and not I are, as contradictories, positive, or positive as contradictories. The I, das Ich, ist überhaupt setzend. The I is positing überhaupt. So schlechthin is that, is only, is positing and nothing else. That, under certain conditions, when it posits the not I not, that it then posits itself, is contingent and has to do with the nature of positing, which is not within the I itself. The I is, in this way of arguing, representing being, which has to orientate itself to the nature of things in order to posit. It's very different. I don't really know what this means. Who has an idea?
There's two arguments here, aren't there? Is that right? There's, because he talks about a third of the way through the paragraph, he talks about diese Folgerungsart. So there's one way of arguing which leads to a realism, and then there's at the end of the paragraph a second one. And that's why at the beginning of the next paragraph he refers to keine Folgerungsart von beiden soll gelten. So there are two arguments, I take it.
I thought the two.
No. I think the Folgerungsart kind of von beiden means first there is the Folgerungsart that leads to realism. Things talk about saying, and then in the previous paragraph we have the Folgerungsart that leads to idealism.
So ideal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah? So there's an idealist Folgerungsart which we have explained. There's a realist Folgerungsart which starts with, this sphere of totality is simply positioned. It's there. And if you say that, and I and not I are part of it, and if you start with that, he says, then the activity of the I, excluding, is possible on the basis of it, and that becomes a qualitative realism, because the I is what posits. It's merely coincidental in this way of thinking that it posits itself when it posits the not I as not posited. And I don't know why that would be really zufällig. And that therefore, in this view, the I has to take its orientation from the way things are, rather than from itself as a positing principle. I don't see how that follows.
Well, it's actually neither way, but the contrast is particularly more straightforward in intelligence because he's distinguishing between idealism in the preceding paragraph, so the subject determines the object, form determines matter. Now getting the contrary position where matter determines form, the object determines the subject, and then you get realism.
Yeah, but how does it work in terms of positing? I don't.
Well, it doesn't work because presumably then the positing itself becomes contingent matter. And that's positing is meant just to be then not that which is proper to the I, as it was in the preceding paragraph, as characterising idealism, but just the characteristic of things that they just sort of pop up.
Yeah.
And the I pops up too.
Yeah, it all just pops up.
So the positive becomes detached from
a
subject reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it says. Yeah. Exactly. That's okay. And then so what that means for the whole, for the nature of substantiality. No one of these particular ways of arguing should obtain, but they should modify each other reciprocally, he says. Weil das nicht einiges von sich ausschließen soll eine höhere Sphäre sein und selbst werden, because the I has to exclude something from itself. There must be a higher sphere and it must be posited. And because there is a higher sphere, weil eine höhere Sphäre ist und gesetzt ist, muss das sich einiges von sich ausschließen. Because there is a higher sphere and it has been posited, the I has to exclude something from itself. Otherwise it would be coincide with this higher sphere. And so kürzer, es ist ein Nicht-Ich, weil das Ich sich einiges entgegensetzt. There is a not I, because the I posits something in opposition to itself, opposes something to itself, und das Ich setzt sich einiges entgegen, weil ein Nicht-Ich ist und gesetzt wird, and the I opposes something to itself, because the not I is and is posited. Keins begründet das andere, not one of these sides grounds the other is a foundation for the other, sondern beide ist eine und dieselbe Handlung des Ich, but both is one and the same act of the I, die bloß in der Reflexion unterschieden werden kann, which can only be kept apart distinguished in reflection. So in the end, it is an act of the I. I think that's what I meant when I said it is by this activity of form that matter is activated. That the totality is activated in the finite act of the I. That's where the infinite is activated. And that indeed is a clear precursor also of the real in Lacan, in a way. It is always that which is the undetermined that every symbolic order runs up against. And it's the same as real, but it's real as a function of the symbolic, insofar as it captures that which is not functionally related to a particular order, to a particular configuration of I. Es ist sogleich klar, so it is clear, dass dieses Resultat gleich sei dem oben aufgestellten Satz, der ideale Ausgangspunkt sind also dasselbe, the ideal will ground are one and the same, and from this we can clarify als demnach durch das gegenwärtige Resultat ebenso wie durch den Ansatz der kritische Realismus aufgestellt werde. And he says, so this is the principle really of critical idealism. And so idealism gets the upper hand in a way, which coincides with the fact that this whole story is a story of the positive and the high. And there are good reasons for that.
Is that higher that because it's both the eye and
No,
no?
no. This is not one. This is not the activity of God.
No, the activities of God. I thought. But in fact, that is the eye that because it's a self and because it's then an eye.
Yeah.
So some sort of eye that before that activity that comes.
Yeah. No. I think what comes before that is higher. That is materiality. That is what in the end calls materiality.
But that eye thing is all in the eye, isn't it? It's in the mind, isn't it? It's all in consciousness.
Yeah, that's what it seems to imply.
Yeah.
And that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No.
Something like possible for.
Yeah, no. I think, but this is my very limited view on it. I'm not a specialist about this at all. I think that this is where two orders of explanation in Fichte, in the end, collapse into one. And so, yes, you would have to maintain a difference between levels of I, but he doesn't do that. And if he would, then he is back with his kind of distinction between a noumenal and an empirical self, and he doesn't want that. So I think, in a way, you might say, in a way, he is giving a metaphysical account of a notion of self-realization that later on becomes part of, is much more de-transcendentalized. And he is struggling here with the transcendental account of self-realization and the fact that maybe a proper account of self-realization makes it no longer necessary to have this distinction between an empirical and a transcendental mode of analysis. But yeah, of course you are right, that's what I meant to say, that it's the fact that this I pops up here at the end and that he calls it idealism. That is the problem of it, I would say.
Can I ask a very back to basics question?
Yeah.
Which is just because in all of this sort of materialist account of everything, it seems to be about escaping determinateness. So it's everyone's sort of finding a space for indeterminacy. And in that, it's almost like form. The word form is that which wants to be escaped from. And I just wonder what happens if you replace the word form with consciousness, because I feel like form has a very negative closing in feel about it, whereas a becoming conscious has a bigger meaning somehow than just form, and that's more what I understand in the kind of idealist tradition. And I'm just wondering if that makes any sense. I don't know the difference between form and consciousness in your mind, if there is a difference. Does that make sense?
There's a difference between two types of consciousness. There's kind of conceptual consciousness, which is which has the quality of formal constraint, which you're referring to, and then there's something more like apprehension, which is going to be more a matter of openness to what there is, less a matter of boxing it in, various ways. So different orientations towards the world. Perhaps one would be more one which is a matter of the imposition of form, the other one would be more a matter of the openness to matter.
Yes, yeah, but then isn't it like all the material, if you identify with materialism, it seems to be in opposition to that kind of determinacy, that kind of consciousness, the consciousness of form, but there's something else in idealism which is a deeper consciousness maybe of something in the universe becoming conscious of itself, which I don't see as in opposition to there still being an open space for indeterminate matter, if that makes sense.
I mean, I agree with what you said, but I see the point. In that sense, it's certainly wrong to say, oh, idealism is bad, and now we have materialism that takes care of all the sins of idealism. That's of course not that's not the point. It is about understanding what this dimension of consciousness, or becoming aware of itself, the cosmos the universe becoming aware of itself, what that is, the nature of it. Is it a realization, a becoming conscious of a pre-given structure, a pre-given essence or form that's already there? Or is it a determination of that form or essence in the process of becoming aware of it? And that seems a difference. And if we contrast idealism with materialism, we are mainly concerned to focus the attention on the point where one characteristic of idealist philosophy is to treat this nature of the real as pre-given.
But if you understand idealism in more that other type of consciousness, then there isn't really this conflict.
No, that's true. Yeah,
so it's only if it's towards an already determined, ultimately a kind of God, I guess, if you like, or teleology, that there is a conflict at all.
Yeah, that's right. That is true, and so these terms, idealism, realism, or idealism, materialism, have a relative value. As many distinctions in philosophy, they can be used to make a particular point, but if you push them too far, then they don't work anymore. That's certainly true. Historically, I think you can tell a story, and that has been done since Marx, really, of the birth of ideology out of idealist modes of thought. And I think that's one of the interesting things for us to, as we go, certainly as we go on and start to read Freud and people like that, where this starts to become clear, how this connection might be made. And so you might say materialism is idealism that has given up its rigidity, and then there's not much problem with, there are a lot of problems with that term as such. And you might also say a materialism that doesn't understand the main impulse of philosophical idealism misses something too. Because this is the whole point of what we've seen here since we started with Leibniz up until Fichte now, is this becoming dynamic of the concept of matter in a way in which a reductive physicalist materialism would find very difficult to come to terms with. Matter is not just, inert stuff. And from the point of view of a reductive way of thinking, if you say matter is not inert stuff, then you say, oh, you are psychologizing matter, or you're a vitalist, or you are a panpsychist, or something like that. Whereas I think what we're trying to do here is to say, no, this notion of matter, when you think about the function it has in philosophy, actually is a notion of dynamism right from the start. That is the place of it. And so insofar as idealism has a place for dynamism, it will have a concept of materiality. And insofar as materialism, so material thinking, understands the point of idealism, the universe becoming aware of itself, the reflexivity of the self, it will be idealist to that extent. Yeah. And so I think the fact that we are now talking again about idealism and materialism and even realism is a very recent thing in philosophy. And there's still many philosophy departments where you will not, it's not a career, it's a career limiting move to speak of idealism versus materialism. Because there's a venerable position in analytic philosophy that we've done away with these kind of isms, that they don't really help us in any way. That in itself can become an ideological gesture to avoid us to ask these kinds of questions. But you have to be careful with these terms, and to simply say that's idealism and that's bad, that's materialism and that's good, or the other way around, is not very helpful. And I think we have certainly not gone far enough to say this is the precise use that we want to put these terms to. But that's what we're trying to find out. We're trying to find out what that contrast means, if anything. There is an interesting text by Bloch in the book on materialism, which is not for nothing called Materialism, its substance and problems. Which is entitled Why All the Great Philosophies Up Until Now Have Been Idealist. And so he asks this question. And he's, of course, the last one among the materialists to discard the most important insights from what you might call philosophical idealism. Just as our great example Lenin says in where it is now, in one of his books, says that he's smart, smart materialism. Smart idealism is closer to materialism than, I can't quote it now.
Clever materialism is more common idealists than with stupid materialism.
Yeah, clever materialism and clever idealism are more in common than clever materialism and stupid materialism, or something like that. So, yeah. And of course, Lenin also said you can't understand the idea of revolution if you haven't read Hegel's logic. So you can't be a Marxist without having read Hegel's logic. So, okay, so these are all big questions. Let's leave Fichte for what he is. It's very, very dense text, isn't it? And let's go to somebody who knows how to write. Sheila.
Can I just mention, C.L.R. James goes into some detail in one of his books on why it was necessary for Lenin to understand what Hegel was saying about materialism and idealism.
It's not Notes on Dialectics, is it?
It's Notes on Dialectics, yeah, in order for what the events in 1917 to occur.
Ah, okay. What is that book?
It's Notes on Dialectics.
Yeah.
Notes on Dialectics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Yeah. Good. We should read that. Okay. So now I wanted to because we were talking about German idealism and matter, the way that concept of matter functions in German idealism, and I wanted to introduce, because I think German idealism is always very difficult, a lighter tone, but no less fundamental in terms of philosophical meaning. And these are the letters on static education by Schiller from the 1790s, in which there are 13 letters, and we have got letters 11, 12, and 13 with us today, in which you get this idea of a sentimental education, but static, or the senses used in a very wide sense. It's the whole sphere of cultivation of perception, experience, and creative activity at the same time. And it culminates in a kind of almost a statement of cultural politics, a determination of what the function of culture is, what the place of culture is in human life, and how culture is actually a necessary element in keeping two contrasted tendencies, not so much in check, but keeping them orientated towards each other. And so we get a discourse here of cultivation, which is, of course, in first instance, an enormous limitation of these letters that we're talking here about. The concept of human nature, it talks about the concept of human nature, it talks about the concept of balancing balancing, contrasting drives. It is a notion of harmony that he's after. It's a very humanist account, so in many ways it's very alien to a lot of the things that a lot of people are familiar with today. On the other hand, there are many points where it breaks open, and where at least I find that there's a lot there that I think is very helpful to look at human reality in this light. And the concept of matter plays a very particular role, although we might argue or we might discuss to what extent it actually is to what extent he falls back maybe in a certain idea of matter as a kind of immanence. I don't think he does that, but there we might look at that. I sent you all an English translation of this as well. Yeah? For those who wanted to, maybe I should. But we are going to now use the German one. And so, well, I just wanted to highlight again how peculiar and particular and in a way refreshing Siebers' style still is, the way he writes. So simple in a way. There's a very, very different mentality from an atmosphere from the schoolified thinking in somebody like Fichte, even to a certain extent in Kant. Wenn die Abstraktion so hoch als sie immer kann hinaufsteigt, so gelangt sie zu zwei letzten Begriffen, bei denen sie stillstehen und ihre Grenzen bekennen muss. Sie unterscheidet in dem Menschen etwas, das bleibt, und etwas, das sich unaufhörlich verändert. Das Bleibende nennt sie seine Person, das Wechselnde seinen Zustand. So when the abstraction raises as high as it can, it reaches two final concepts, where abstraction has to stop and has to acknowledge its limits. That in itself is already such a... How does he know? So abstraction distinguishes in the human being something that remains the same and something that changes continuously. This remaining thing it calls person, and the changing element it calls state. So we've got a person and a state. We've got the self and its determinations, and these we think themselves as in a necessary entity, God as one and the same, and as two as divided in finite beings, so human beings. The person, with all continuity of the person, the state changes, and with all change of states, the person remains. We begin from der Ruhe zur Tätigkeit, we go from rest to activity, from affect to Gleichgültigkeit, from being affected to being indifferent, von der Übereinstimmung zum Widerspruch, from agreement to contradiction. But we are always, wir sind doch immer, und das unmittelbar aus uns folgt bleibt. We are always there. What falls from us always remains. In the absolute subject only, in dem absoluten Subjekt allein beharren mit der Persönlichkeit auch alle ihre Bestimmungen, weil sie aus der Persönlichkeit fließen. In an absolute subject, with personhood, also all the other determinations remain because they follow from this personhood. Everything, what God is, die Gottheit, the divinity is, it is because it is. Sie ist folglich alles auf ewig, weil sie ewig ist. She is everything eternally because she is eternal. And that is not the case for the finite human being. Person and state are different, and because of that, neither the state can be founded on a person, nor a person after the state somebody is in. If the latter would be true, the person would have to change. If it was the first, then the state would have to continue. So he posits kind of almost like a fundamental dualism. He says these two spheres of the person that you are and the states you are in are unrelated. They're not unrelated, but they don't follow from each other. They are not of the same order. The person that remains is of a different order from the state, the changing states that we are in. And precisely because they are something different, they have something to say to each other, but they should never interfere, they should never cross each other's territory. And that's what it seems to be saying in this general idea of culture. Culture is based on understanding what these different spheres are, and assigning to them their proper function or their role, and making sure that they don't overstep their area, which is what they want to do, or what they try to do. So, but there is a story about, this is not about keeping people in check or oppressing or repressing natural drives. It's quite the contrary. The idea to repress natural drives follows from an overstepping of personhood into the area of state or experience, rather than the other way around. So we'll understand that in a minute. So the person and state cannot be each other's ground. Yeah? En so, die persoon muss ihr eigener Grund sein. Denn das Bleibende kann nicht aus der Veränderung fließen. The person has to be its own ground, because what remains, what stays, what's continuous, cannot follow from change. En so hätten wir dann fürs Erste die Idee des Absoluten von sich selber gebunden sein. And that's where the idea comes from, of an absolute being is grounded in itself, and that's freedom. He calls that idea freedom. So personhood is connected to freedom. Yeah? And then the state, the Zustand, must have a ground, but it cannot be itself. It follows from something or on something. And so the condition of all dependent being, of all becoming, of all state in a way, is time. Die Zeit ist Bedingung alles Wesens, ist ein identischer Satz. Time is the condition of all becoming, is an identical, an identical Satz, which means a tautology. Because it doesn't say anything else than die Folge ist die Bedingung, dass etwas erfolgt. The consequence is the condition that something follows on. That something consequences. So freedom and time are the two fundamental ideas at the heart of the human being. And freedom has to do with personhood, and time has to do with state. The person, he then goes on to say, cannot begin in time or end in time, because the person has got nothing to do with time. So the whole area of personhood and freedom is in a way above time, or below it. And it's a sphere of freedom, it's a sphere of law, it's a sphere of justice, and it's a sphere of Gesetz, yeah? So of law or order. But it is atemporal. It is atemporal.
Isn't that very similar to Kant?
Exactly. Yeah, that's very similar to Kant, of course. Yeah. In a way, Shiva is a Kantian. Yeah? And then he says, okay, what does that mean? Well, what does that mean for the realization that human beings become? That they are not everything they are all at once. They only exist historically, they are born, they die, they have to develop. So how does that relate to this fact that this I is eternal and is not in time or of time? He says, well, das der Mensch erst wird, so that human beings have to become, is not an objection. Denn der Mensch ist nicht bloß Person überhaupt, sondern Person, die sich in einem bestimmten Zustand befindet. Because human being is not only the person, it's the person in a particular state. Aller Zustand aber, alles bestimmte Dasein steht in der Zeit. But states arise in time, and so the human being as a phenomenon has to have a beginning, although pure intelligence within it is eternal. Without time, he would never be a determined being. Seine Persönlichkeit würde zwar in der Anlage, aber nicht in der Tat existieren. And that's very important. His personality would exist potentially as a possibility, but not actually, nicht in der Tat, literally in the act. And nur durch die Folge seiner Vorstellungen wird das beharrliche Ich sich selbst zu erscheinen. Only through the series of representations, the continuous I becomes for itself appearance. And that is, I think, almost coextensive with what we just read in Fichte. Isn't it? Yeah. So you see that although he starts by saying person and time, freedom and time, person and state are separate areas, the person requires a series of states in order to bring herself to appearance. Actualize in the literal sense of bringing to appearance, coming and manifesting. Yeah? Manifesting. And at the same time, this series of representations, these Zustände, these states, are mere states, they are world, he says, literally on, insofar as they are not seized by a person whose manifestations they become. So I can live my life and just everything goes from one moment to another, I follow every whim. Right? In that sort of a life, it's not a manifestation of a person, he seems to be saying. But at the same time, I cannot manifest myself as a person if I don't do it in a series of states. And there lies freedom. There lies the possibility, I think it's a very, Kant's circles are very freedom. There lies the possibility for me to take my life into my hands. I have to make the states of the world that are me, I have to make them into mine, into me. I have to take them on. And when I do that, then I can manifest my person in the states, in my states, and my states cease to be me in the world and become mine. But that means, die Materie der Tätigkeit, so the matter of activity, or the reality, which the highest intelligence creates on its own, of itself, which it creates for itself, human beings have to receive. Und zwar empfängt er dieselbe als etwas außer ihm Befindliches im Raume. This matter, this materiality with which he works to manifest himself, he gets from the outside as something that exists in space. Und als etwas in ihm Wechselndes in der Zeit auf dem Wege der Wahrnehmung. And in terms of sensory perception, something that changes in time. So it is the outside. That's where it comes from for the finite being. It doesn't come out of itself. And this outside, changing stuff, matter, accompanies the I which never changes. Yeah. And then he says, so only insofar as he changes, does he exist, existiert er. Nur indem er sich verändert, existiert er. Only as far as he changes, he exists, the human being, because he relates to the state. Nur indem er unveränderlich bleibt, existiert er. This should also be in Italian, so the emphasis is different. Only as far as he changes, he exists, only insofar as he remains unchanged, he exists. Yeah? Yeah. And so, the human being, represented in its completion, would be die heilige Einheit, die die Truth der Veränderung ewig selber bleibt. Which would be the unity, the continuous unity, which changes the same, eternally the same, in the floods of change.
Also, it is very Fichte and Kantian, but it's also quite regressive compared to both of those two philosophers in the way he substantializes the I.
Yeah, totally.
In a way which Kant would glorify that, and Fichte certainly has a much more dynamic conception of the I. Even that closing image, it's just like a rock in the sea.
Yeah, exactly.
It's coming up, just proving itself by sustaining the kind of impact of the waves. It's not quite the idea of the self generating itself in Fichte or even Kant.
Yeah. I think
it goes away with Schiller's classicism. There's a discussion later of optimal classical works of art, the Juno, Minerva, and so forth, and the idea of the human marvel of antiquity remaining for us as exemplars is indicative of some sort of aesthetic substantiality as well, which he values.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's certainly true, and yeah, that's certainly true. It's very nice towards the end of Johan der Eigentlichkeit, the of authenticity. Adorno writes about Schiller's concept of Würde, dignity, and then he explains there that actually, so you could read this as a kind of, like you said, rock in the sea, as a notion of dignity that's almost stoic. That it's almost I can keep my drives in check, my emotions, and I'm not perturbed by anything. Yeah? But actually, Schiller says in his essay on menschliche Würde that this Stoic mentality, or the Stoic sage who is unperturbed, arises out of a repression of what is natural, and that you should not do that. And he goes on to say that later on in this text as well. So I think it's absolutely true, and for me it's an open question. It's absolutely true that there seems to be this almost regression into a substantialist account of human nature. Then when you read it carefully, it turns out that actually he's saying something quite different, and this notion of der Mensch vorgestellt in seiner Vollendung, human being thought of in its completion, becomes almost a limit notion of what humanity is, something we don't have access to at all at the moment. That is only in negatively or in a glimmer, something that we could imagine of what that would be like, but not the image of any kind of existing human formation or human role. But I think this is for me the main point of this text, to learn to see that. So if you go a little to the end, I'll point it out now, otherwise we miss it. In the 13th letter, he says, and he talks about natural science, but it's really when he says, so when this what he calls later on form, this principle of person, of law, of recht, of vrijheid, when that comes too early, he says. So when we form a human being, that's it. When we form a human being by repressing the variety of experience, then we get really sort of prejudiced people. We get prejudiced people with whom the function of thinking comes too early. They think they have understood everything already, and they are therefore insensitive to the richness of experience. And at the same time, and that's almost an inversion of the passivity of experience and the activity of form. On the other hand, if you get a situation where somebody makes the passive principle of experience into the active one and follows always only what comes from experience, then that person can never develop a personality. And so, yes, there is something about classicism there, absolutely, but it is not a classicism of repressing drives in order to get a quiet, well-formed, restful whole. It is, to use that phrase, a creative tension, and that is what it is about. I'm going to. I was going a bit too quickly, so I don't know where I'm looking. Where he says, I'm a formed Mensch, a formed human being.
You can hand over to the present force the intensity demanded by the active force. You can encroach by material impulsion or the formal impulsion. Perception of it.
When he speaks about so that it's wrong to
the fourth paragraph.
But that's it. I'm sorry, I should have run ahead of myself.
I think that the sense begins about dimension who a form is.
Yeah.
Because that's the end, the penultimate paragraph. It doesn't say the form too much.
No, it doesn't. It's about dimensional forms, yeah. En zo formuliert er Mensch exactly. He goes on to say, so we have these two principles. And here in this first paragraph here, of chapter 13, the one we're looking at now, he says, natural science has made so few advantages because we think teleologically. And teleological thought in the explanation of nature is a form of overemphasizing the form, overemphasizing personhood, because we treat everything as if it was part of our form of thought. Yeah? We have to understand. So it is das bestimmende Vermögen, the form principle, which we shove under, which we give priority now over the empfangende, the receptive one. And that means that the mannigfaltigkeit, the plurality of our experiences is lost if we put this scheme, it was a prejudice on our experiences that they have to conform to some sort of goal. Yeah? So we have an ungeduldig vorgreifender Vernunft, an impatiently running ahead, a reason running ahead of itself, which goes against experience rather than that we move into experience in that attitude. And then he says, if then after hundreds of years somebody comes who mit ruhigen, keuschen, offenen Sinne approaches what gives itself from experience, so with a peaceful, keusch, chaste and open senses, with chaste and open senses approaches experience rather than stampeding it onto it, and then discovers that certain things are actually quite different than we have thought in all our prevention, in all our prejudice, then we are surprised that so many people had not seen what this person saw. And so he says, this voreilige streben nach harmonie, this striving after harmony that comes too soon, before we have gathered all the strings together, which should be part of it. This usurpation of our force of thought in an area in which it should not be in unconditional command is the ground of so much infertility in so many thinking Köpfe, thinking heads, and it is difficult to say if science has been more hindered by Sinnlichkeit, sensuality, which does not which does not achieve a form, or by reason, which does not await content to come, but puts its scheme onto it too early. And that's again a form of ideology. And then he goes on to say, same applies to philanthropy and to creating a compassion in people. Ebenso schwer dürfte es zu bestimmen sein, ob unsere praktische Philanthropie mehr durch die Heftigkeit unserer Begierden oder durch die Rigidität unserer Grundsätze, mehr durch den Egoismus unserer Sinne oder durch den Egoismus unserer Vernunft gestört und erkältet wird. If it's practical philanthropy hindered more by the intensity of our desires or by the rigidity of our principles, in order to make us to compassionate, helpful, active people, feeling and character have to be united. Feeling, Gefühl, this is the receptive one, character is the form principle. So wie uns Erfahrung zu verschaffen, Offenheit der Sinne mit Energie des Verstandes zusammentreffen muss. In order to have experience, we have to have openness of the senses and energy of the understanding. That's of course, again, a completely Kantian phrase, taken here out of the area of transcendental philosophy and becoming a principle of talking about human life. Yeah? And then he says, how can wie können wir, by noch so lobenswürdige Maximen with all the lobenswürdige laudable maxims, how can we be fair, good and humane towards other people when we don't have the capacity to take strange nature, so something other than ourselves, truthfully and loyally in ourselves, to appropriate strange situations, to make others' feelings, strange feelings, to our own. So without being able to put ourselves into somebody else's position. This capacity is repressed in Erziehung, so in education, which we get, as much as in education that we give ourselves, is suppressed in the same measure als man die Macht der Begierden zu brechen und den Charakter durch Grundsätze zu befestigen sucht. Insofar as one tries to break the power of desire and one tries to to form, to fix character by principles. You see, and I think that is something that is where it turns out that Schiller is actually talking about something quite different from the kind of classical view of human nature that we might see in that earlier section. Because, weil es Schwierigkeit ist, because it is difficult, by other Regsamkeit gefühls, because it is difficult in all the excitability of feeling to stay true to one's principles, so ergreift man das bequemere Mittel, one takes the easy way out, the easier instrument, durch Abstufung der Gefühle den Charakter sicherzustellen. By numbing feeling to ensure character. And that's of course that's a whole critical pedagogy right there. Yeah? So building character by numbing feelings, that is what he's going against here. Dann freilich ist es unendlich leichter für einen entwaffneten Gegner Ruhe zu haben, seinen mutigen lustigen Feind zu beherrschen. In this operation, he says, then mostly consists that which we call form a human being. And then ironically, zwar im besten Sinne des Wortes, was Bearbeitung des inneren Nichtlos des äußeren Menschen bedeutet. Ein so formierter Mensch, such a formed human being, will be secured wird darüber gesichert sein, rohe Natur zu sein, und das soll zu erscheinen, he will not appear as a raw nature, wird aber zugleich, but at the same time, gegen alle Empfindungen der Natur durch Gesetze geharnischt sein und die Menschheit von außen mit dem ebenso wenig als die Menschheit von innen beikommen können. So it will not be raw nature, but it will also have been harnessed against experiences of nature by principles, and humanity from the outside will be as inaccessible to him as humanity on the inside. And I think so there you get a very, very profound sort of cultural, political, educational agenda that uses this conception of matter and form that's very much based on Kantian and Fichten principles in order to develop a concrete idea of what the role of culture is. And that's often misunderstood precisely when we read it by saying, oh, here we go again, this is classicism. It's not classicism, not in that sense. And so, okay, that's where we're going to stop. Okay, thanks very much for your attention. We now have a few weeks break. We start again on the 13th of January when we will look at Hegel's Schelling. So I will send you the pre-reading before Christmas. So we've got something for the Christmas trees. Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then I look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.